Okay, we have a quorum. We're going to start. To let you all know, there's no voting today. There's no official action. This is a kind of a study session, so to speak. So we're going to open it up to
We saw that the agenda was posted.
I'm sorry, agenda was posted. And we do have a quorum. And we'll take outside comments. Anybody wishing to speak? Public comment. Hearing none. Go ahead, Jackie.
Okay, well, I thought I would just review the staff report. I'm going to stand because I can see it. I guess I should do what I told Harley to do. Second. I thought I would go over the staff reports, and some of you are new today. And the request, as you know, the request is for, we already go over, we're talking about a people mover. The people mover is an automated transit system for the Inglewood Entertainment District. The project is approximately $2 billion project. We have already provided $385 million towards the project, and we're being asked to provide another $493.1 million. The Inglewood proposal would, and these funds are coming from Measure M funds, which are currently highway funds. They cannot legally be transferred into transit funds until 2027. So what this motion is doing today, that Inglewood is proposing, and we're not voting on it, we're asking questions about it, would be to create an exemption to our $250 million cap, create an exception to our local match policy, and then request Metro to use their funds to transfer the needed money to the project until such time as we would then reallocate the funds when it would be proper for us to do so. This would be subject to a repayment schedule that would be agreed to by Metro and the COG. Sorry, air conditioning. And so the executive director would be authorized to negotiate that repayment schedule with Metro. One of the things that is a concern is that, number one, the eligibility of the funds. Right now, we can't in a binding fashion. So we can say we want to do this in the future, but we can't bind our next month. You could theoretically take a vote to unbind the funds or to not allocate, because we cannot bind the council, your board members in 2026, 2027 to take this action. We can just say today we want this action taken in 2027. So that's it. So that's the first thing, the eligibility of the funds. Well, we do have a cap of $450 million for any project, and this project would be greatly exceeding that cap. We also have a match. The other thing is that you've asked for, thank you. The other thing you've asked for is what are the projects that are going to be available? What would you be spending this money on? As you know, and those of you that have, I know some of you have actually gone to your public works directors and asked them what projects, as you know, they do not know what projects they're going to need in 2030, 2040. And the loan that we might have to take out with Metro, the bonding, for example, could go as much as up to 2050. We have no idea what projects you want to be doing by then. And we have asked, and I don't know if they have it today, but we've asked for a cash flow because we don't even know when we could begin the negotiations with Metro. Until we know when Metro would need the money for the project, we don't know when we could make an agreement with Metro. And so in the interim, it seems to me it would be prudent if you vote to do this, to sequester all these funds and not make them available until we actually can do a funding agreement, which we don't know today. We do have some projects that have come up. All cities do have some projects, but they're early on. We've talked about projects on the freeways. We've talked about LA City having a big project, and we've talked about the Sea Line extension. Do you want to ask me a question?
Yeah, just a quick question on the sequestering funds. Do you mean sequestering from Inglewood and sequestering from all the other cities, or sequestering from any projects that the other cities want to.
we wouldn't be able to allocate those funds. For example, if we were to fund right now, let's say we were to fund the design of a 3 or 4 year project, that project would be ready for construction around 2020, what is that, 2028. The Inglewood People Mover would be ready to draw funds in 2028, we think. We don't know. And so it would be very hard for us today to actually let projects go into design because we wouldn't be able to pay for their construction when the time came, and we won't know that right now. So there's a lot of unknowns to this. They're recommending repayment of the backstop. Excuse me. Go ahead.
Is ITC same as Inglewood People
I'm
Mover?
sorry. Yes, I should say ITC.
Okay, I just
I'm
want to make
terribly
sure.
sorry. Thank you. Okay, so we're talking about repayment of the backstop. They're talking about repaying the backstop. Backstop is going to be used if the project is, will be used if the project exceeds its current budget. The budget has, nobody knows. The budget has gone up each time and costs are going up. So we would have to make sure we save the backstop as well. And if we get repaid, that would be very good.
So Jackie, quick question on the backstop, right? We had $108 million, which we originally approved for the backstop, right? And the whole intent of that was what my understanding was that was then going to go be matched, right? Is that correct? That was going to be matched. So now we have a request, if clarify. So now we have a request where we're funding a backstop. You know, I'm using the analogy, we're betting on a game, right? So we're betting on a game and we bet $108 million. We lost the bet. So now my partner has said, hey, I'll give you that $108 million. Now he's coming back saying, hey, go bet on another game. Trust me, go bet another $118 million and trust me. Is that kind of what I'm getting out of this?
Not exactly, not at all. Actually, not at all. Basically, the backstop is a requirement of the FTA, or they give us the full funding agreement that says that we want this there in case it runs over the budgeted amount, okay, the bid amount. So there'll be a bid amount. And based on that bid amount, there's a percentage that you have to have as a quote backstop in the event that there are overruns. Okay, we do not intend there for there to be an overrun, but that's what.
Right, but
Sometimes we call it a
It's
contingency,
absolute-
correct?
Yeah, so, but for clarity,
Backstop is over the contingency as well.
but for clarity, we had an original backstop of $108 million. Now you're asking us to backstop $216 million, correct?
To clarify that, at the time, so we did ask for you to reallocate sub-regional equity program funds that had been previously allocated to the Sentinel Grade Separation Project. Other projects that we said that we came and spoke for about a year and a
You
half.
should really speak up.
Don't take the mic.
It's on the table.
Oh, here,
Can you guys hear me better now?
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we talked about a year and a half ago about the regional benefit and that it was a better investment of those sub-regional equity funds than the Sentinel Grade Separation at the time. At the time, when you committed the $108 million, there was no way of repaying the COG. It was $108 million that if we needed to tap into, there was no way of being able to repay it. Well, we've come back and said, for every dollar that you put into the backstop, over time, we will commit to repaying back dollar for dollar, all of those dollars through the Climate Resilience District. So we have kept our word in terms of being able to come back with a better deal that provides those resources back. Even Jackie just said it would be a good thing.
That's a $216 million
Correct.
payback, but it is on top of the other contribution. So the contribution, the total contribution, it has to include the backstop because we have to save that money in case there's an overrun. Let me continue and then we can go on. So that's the backstop. And so as I mentioned, the cap and the drawdown is not known. There was a ninth recommendation, the recommendations that we had given on pay, I'm looking at the wrong agenda. There was a ninth recommendation that came out of the Transportation Committee that you should all know about. And that is that if the sea line expansion doesn't happen, the funds would go for that. And I don't know when if we would be deciding if the sea line extension would happen or not. The funds would go for the ITC instead. As I said, I wanted to clarify that non-binding And the backstop that will get repaid is actually something we still have to reserve. We just don't, until we can negotiate the agreement, we don't know what that means. The other thing about the climate resilience district that is going to pay us back is I did ask about what the proceeds were from the climate resilience district. What I was told, and if I'm wrong, please correct me later, but what I was told is that for the first 7 years, the climate resilience district will have $1.5 million. And after the 7th year, it will have 700,000 over that. If that's the case, that's not very much money to repay $216 million back.
So I think we can wait for
Wait,
clarification.
can you do that after I finish? Okay. So let me finish. So this is, before this weekend, I felt I was having a lot of discussions with myself. And I have been involved in transportation for many, many, many years. And I thought, I've been sitting back and not saying what I think. And I, as a staff, as your staff, as someone who has been involved in building the rail lines in Los Angeles County, I wanted to say that my recommendation would be that you not do this. That you have so many projects that we can do in the South Bay to address the future, to address what each one of you can do in your cities, that it would be my strong staff recommendation, which of course you don't have to take, but is my strong recommendation from my experience that you should not be supporting this project. Then Saturday night came, and on Saturday night, we got the letters that you see before you. The letters before you are from the owners of the venues, and I think there's some representatives here, who told us that they are not supportive of this project, that it could hurt major events coming into the community from around the world, that they've tried to stop the project, and we are the last line of defense for this project to continue. And I have I immediately contacted Metro, and I was told that Metro had never seen these letters before. I contacted other people who said they were supporters, and they said they had not seen these letters. This is a total misrepresentation of what we have been given to you. And I just wanted to strongly suggest to you that we have not been given all of the information that we needed for you to make this recommendation. And with that, Mr. Chair, I conclude my report.
Thank you. I believe Mayor Butts has something to say.
Better believe. Well, first of all, thank you guys this time. I would say that I've been on boards of directors for the last, 32 years. Okay, probably about 25 of them. Never in all that time have I ever seen an executive director direct the board as to what he thinks they should do and strenuously as it happened just now. But that's okay. Now, let's talk about these letters. I wasn't going to talk about them. Let's talk about these letters. We have received over 200 letters in total of support, 300 letters of support. We didn't send them to you because you know why? Letters don't mean anything. What matters is it a worthwhile project? Is it beneficial to all the stakeholders? That's what matters. Now, these two letters were sent on a Sunday with a recitation of attorney that's supposed to represent all of us, with catty little thing about referring to me as Butts, not Mayor Butts, not Director Butts. It was the most, silly thing I've ever seen. Now, Lisa's gonna pass out other letters from the venues. Would you take that, Sid? Just pass it down. Now, these are from SoFi, they're from Intuit. Now, we never showed you these letters. You know why? Because letters don't mean anything. And so to make it appear that this was such an urgent thing that on a Sunday afternoon, we had to send it not to the members of the board who are her boss, but to send it to every elected official, every city manager, in the South Bay. That's somewhat indicative of a little bit of, I don't know, poor judgment. It's a little bit indicative of a little bit of bias, particularly the letter from the attorney who says, I'm good friends with the attorney from the venues, and this is how they feel about us. I've never seen anything like that. So let's go on to, now so you can absorb those letters. They don't mean anything more than the last two letters, other than we're going to respond to the last two letters. The letters were sent to me personally, hand couriered to me for me. Okay, and now someone's decided that now they're useful to send to every elected official. Anyway, so you make of that what you will. Now, first I want to thank all of you for voting on the Transportation Committee to recommend full support of the full board on Thursday. We appreciate this opportunity to continue to educate people about what's an important project. And also, let's make this really clear. This project does not make or break James Butts. I've done 52 years in public service. I've been a police chief 3 times. I'm the longest serving mayor in the history of Inglewood. We have had a lot of success. The reason I'm involved in this aggregation of the largest amount of grant funds for any city ever in the South Bay is because I believe this is a regional project. I believe that there will come a time in the future when everybody will say, oh my goodness, I'm glad we did this because this got people to use the metro system. We had a 12-day period in August of last year. We had 6 Taylor Swift concerts, 3 Beyonce concerts in 12 days. During that 12-day period, ridership on the K line increased by 35%. 35%. That's significant. Ridership on event day and non-event day ridership will reduce congestion. It'll double the K line ridership and the metro system at large. It'll provide cleaner air. Economic catalyst to the South Bay region. Continue direct and indirect economic benefits to the entire South Bay and LA County. 17,000 jobs, over $2 billion investment. With the circulation value of money, another $3.4 billion for the county, because the people that make wages, they spend money, and those people spend money and spend money. And that's by the LA EDC. Metro's our partner, and they're working with us to make this happen. Metro's committed to working with the COG on a repayment plan that could be flexible, and it's up to the COG to determine what works best. It'll take money off the top for COG priorities, a percentage of the annual amount that the COG receives. We have not been prescriptive, as repayment strategy should be developed by the COG, but we're here to support. And Metro's here virtually, and you'll hear from them to address any questions. I already talked about the letters that were so kindly sent out yesterday. The infrastructure is not designed just to benefit the venues, but the working people of our city and region, and the long-range growth of housing and commercial activity in our region. Since day one, we have coordinated with the venues, and we have with all stakeholders. Now let's understand this. Now look, I love the venues. Maria Camacho's here. I think she's like a sister. Gerard is here. He's like a brother. And there are times when interests diverge. Do you hear what I'm saying? Something that's good today, maybe in reflection later on, particularly when you think about the congestion, the construction disruption for the businesses. When you think about the fear that maybe they'll be on the hook one day for the operations and maintenance fees, that's their right. And I have no problem with them having a change of heart. But you know, the letters that you received, we are sending a response to them. And I guess we'll give it to Jackie, and then on Sunday evening, she'll probably send it to all of you and all your councils. I don't know, maybe. The reality is this is not about letters. And this doesn't mean that there's any less of a symbiosis between the venues and Inglewood. It means sometimes people have business interests that they feel the need to articulate. And I respect that. And sometimes there are city interests that I have a need to articulate, and I articulate them. And I guess all this proves is nobody's giving me money because we have differences. And that's the main thing. There'll be differences. Now, this project is designed to alleviate residents and small business concerns related to traffic on event days. It's designed to support the long-range growth of plans for the city and for the sub-region. And it's designed to provide world-class transit infrastructure for generations to come. That's the key, generations to come. Not just for the period of the construction period, for generations to come. We'll get through construction, just like we got through the construction of the venues. The streets were messed up when the venues were being built. That's a cost of construction. And you know what? And people wrote me letters about that too. And I didn't send those to you either. So the vote on Thursday is critical, but it's very important today that we answer any questions that you might have about this project, because in the end, I'm going to know that I did my best for the region. This is not just about Inglewood by any stretch of imagination. And one more thing about that original allocation. That original allocation was for the grade separation at Florence and Centinela. That was a separate, that was something we had already allocated, and we switched it to this project. So now I'm ready to take your questions unless Lisa wants to give a presentation.
Okay, so what we had set up is.
They don't have your own-
Probably need to. We set up time for real deep dive Q&A, knowing that, you know, a lot of what you heard, but I wanted to make sure, and the mayor touched on it, that again, through stations, through planning, through every step of the way, and really kind of history of coordination with the venues. And again, as the mayor said, we're working on the newest thing, which is construction during events. What I have here today is a set of questions and answers of Metro here. I think it's very important to hear from Metro. Metro, we have Rodney here to talk through what the projections were and what the projections are for the Measure M dollars. How Metro will proactively coordinate with the COG to be able to establish a repayment plan that not only allows the project to move forward, but do it in a way that is allowing all the other COG priorities to move forward without any bit of freeze whatsoever. There's a number of strategies we can deploy, and that's the kind of conversation that I thought we would get into today.
So before you
I'd like to
start,
do that.
we're gonna take questions first from the group. You can do your presentation on that. So if we have any questions, throw those out now, please. Go ahead.
Sorry. Okay, well, and thank you. That's what I thought we were going to do too, is answer questions, which is great. As many of you know, I'm an engineer. I actually started my career at Caltrans. It didn't last so that long. I worked for consulting companies for about a decade and started my own engineering company about 1996, a lot of years ago. I just happen to be now representing the city of Rancho Palos Verdes. And so my questions are based on what's best for the COG and for my community. You know, this project is any big transportation project. Yeah. Like any project. Like any project in any big metro or Caltrans project or city project, these go on for years and years and years. And over the last several years, we've actually had new transportation technology. One of those happens to be ongoing in the city of Las Vegas with the Boring Company. And so my question is, I know that you're very far down the tracks, pardon the pun, but has Inglewood or Metro also analyzed utilizing that sort of system that they've been utilizing, which has started at the convention center and utilizes tunneling, then it's expanding out throughout Vegas, which is a very cost-effective method, but maybe not the right method. I wondered if you guys had explored that.
That's interesting to ask that. Elon Musk has SpaceX, which is, I don't know, 2.5 miles away from the venue sites. And I actually took a ride in his tunnel system, or probably, I don't know, 2.5 years ago. And so, while it's interesting, it was very scary. It wouldn't have the throughput that we would need for the type of events that we're holding. Some of our events are as many as 70,000. Some with Taylor Swift are as many as 100,000 standing alone. So we just don't believe there would be the throughput in the underground system.
And at the beginning, I'm talking going back to 2018, we looked at a number of different alternatives. From different pathways, whether you went down Century, you went down Prairie, you went down Arborvitae. So we looked at different alternative alignments. We looked at different alternative modes, busing included. We also looked at what if you had a system that was at grade and what it meant to actually make certain turns depending upon which area you're trying to activate. And when it came to that particular, like the PRT, I got to go on that too, actually, sir. And we looked at how we would connect that way. There was nothing to say that that is not preserved for a future option to come from the south. There's nothing about that, but the alignment that we have, it shows it had the greatest ridership benefit with the least, with the less costly and less impacts. We could have put it all in the public right of way. And we were activating the downtown Inglewood area while also thinking about the critical connection. And going back, even when we started with the venues, we looked at putting stations. We had 5 station options even. We even talked about doing 2 stations. Maybe that was the 5. And there was a concern that that was too far from the venues. They really wanted to make sure there were 2 stations. And so we talked about walk distance. We went through a number of exercises in the alternative analysis, all completely documented in the environmental, both on CEQA and NEPA. And the city elected this particular, given the amount of ridership, the throughput, and how you can modulate between the transit metro system and the venues in a short amount of time, because it's not that easy to find a system that can not only be able to survive and be effective for non-event days, but on event day surges. So this is why we landed where we landed.
And what is roughly you guys remember the passengers per hour that this is going to be transporting?
Okay, no, you're talking about for the ITC? Or
For the ITC.
11 to 17,000, depending on how many cars there are. And one more thing, that's why it was so brilliant for you to mention the Elon Musk underground system. We thought it would be great as a connection to the Hawthorne Airport for people that flew in. But let me tell you something, I was in one of those cars. I couldn't wait to get out of it. Because if you've got any sense of claustrophobia, and I don't, it would probably be a pretty scary ride. And there's only in each car, 4 or 5 people. No. I'm talking about the underground system. I won't answer the question directly. It's not a big throughput system, but the monorail different of Las Vegas.
Right. And I would just say, and I just took the tour there, and they're expanding it quite a bit through the entire city of Las Vegas.
Okay.
And you're right, at first it's just point to point, but they found that at each point source, they're able to do about 4,000 to 5,000 riders per hour, which doesn't meet your number if it's just one location, but if it's several locations, Hawthorne, the airport, the connection to the metro, it could potentially be done. I don't know if you're too far down the line to be able to retool any of that.
I don't know if it's been too far down the line. We also have the consideration of the Inglewood Newport Fall, which should be the Culver City Newport Fall, but they decided to name it for Inglewood. And we do have geological concerns as well about underground systems.
Okay, well, you answered the question that you actually did investigate it, and so.
Yes, sir.
Okay, very
And
good.
we almost finished, near completion with the procurement of this. So we have a technology, we have a contractor, we've gone all through the bid. We're now at the point of just again securing your last vote, working with LA Metro, turning in our financial plan to FTA, that they have vetted the system, and they have a commitment of $1 billion hanging out there for us, ready to move forward on the right agreement.
Has the construction bid been made public?
The construction bid, we just got we worked all summer to negotiate that bid. The whole bid now has been updated and it reflects our ask. That's what's here.
Got it. All right, those are my questions for now. Thank you.
Debbie, go ahead.
Thank you. At the end of your presentation, Mr. Butts, you mentioned that the original allocation that COG made went to the Florence grade separation project, and I assume you're implying that the cap won't apply to this second request. I would like staff to address that question.
Hold on a second. I don't think I implied that at all. What I said was we asked to transfer the funds that were allocated to the grade separation project to this project because we felt that one would obviate the need for the other. That's why. So we weren't suggesting that at all.
The same project, same cap.
Same project.
Okay, all right, because the conclusion I drew when you mentioned that was that you were trying to draw a distinction and try to imply that the cap wouldn't apply this time. So thank you for clarifying that.
What you see here on the chart, and I know this was handed out in the presentation last, is that we have a reflection of the current commitment from the COG to date.
Can you make
which
your full
includes the
screen?
Measure R and the Measure M, and that compares now to the updated request.
Can you also send the letters to David so that he can post them for the people on the chat that you sent?
But they should be sent to all the city council members also, right?
I would expect, right?
But
They're very old letters.
can you make that full screen, please? Sir,
Having a little bit of
you go to slideshow, the little slideshow thing down at the bottom right,
what happened in news.
just click right here.
Can I add a point of clarification on the initial movement from Sentinel grade to ITC?
Yeah.
When Transportation Committee met on those, Inglewood made it very persuasive in clarifying.
Turn that on. Hit the red button.
That both of those projects could not be completed simultaneously, just logistically by room on the ground. So the Sentinel grade extension funds were prioritized to the ITC. But in fairness, Mr. Mayor, that was not an open-ended prioritization. It was moved over with a series of decision points that would show the viability of ITC.
You're 100% correct.
And one of those, we have not hit the trip bar yet. We had that for a few months. But those funds, that wasn't a selection of an either or, that was a yes, but this one is the priority. So those funds will be moved over contingent that the ITC is viable and then.
You're 100%.
Yes,
So we started.
You gotta hit the red button. Not the red button.
We started to hear about this project probably about 2 months ago, right? That Inglewood was going forward with it. No, I mean, I feel like we was pushed off. They weren't ready yet, and then we pushed it off to.
You're talking about this latest request.
Yes, the latest
The
request.
latest request, yes.
Okay, so it would have been nice to have more time to address all this and understand what agreement we might reach with Metro Board. So when is it anticipated that if we were to vote for this, we would actually reach an agreement with the Metro regarding repayment?
So that's great, because Metro is here. So we should talk to Metro about what does it mean to have an agreement with Metro relative to repayment?
So like, what's the interest rate, which I posed to you? That's gonna help us determine whether we can, whether we're gonna have to front load our repayments back to this, or if we can stretch it out. And then what are the assumptions associated with these columns of funding that you say we're gonna get? Is that a surefire thing? Maybe Metro can answer that. Or is there an assumption there that things are gonna continue to be hunky-dory in the economy and sales tax and the like?
So Rodney, you're here. It would be great to just introduce yourself, your role, who you are at Metro. And we talk a little bit about, again, the confidence in the Measure M projection. And then we could talk about the repayment plan options and how you're committed to working with them. And so with your whole Metro team.
Maybe just before we jump into that, one last question is on the subject of alternatives to this. If you go to the F1 in Austin, what you see is they got 3 lanes of traffic, 2 are jammed up, bumper to bumper, and 1 is coned off for buses, and the buses just fly by. And the fact that the buses fly by, the shuttles fly by, is an inducement for people to get out of their cars and take mass transit. Why isn't a solution like that something that Inglewood would be comfortable bringing to these venues to get people? And I already gave the example last at the Transportation Committee. It took me 45 minutes to get from Torrance Transit Center to SoFi Stadium for a game. It took me over an hour with a kid, 15 minutes to get back because the bus is sitting in the same traffic that everybody else is in. And that seems like an easy solution. Jam up the cars and more traffic, create a bus lane that flies down the street.
Well, there is no free lunch, right? And so if you dedicate that lane to buses only, that means everybody that's not going to where that bus is going is in a car, and their commute is even worse. Traffic is backed up even further between intersections. And also something that people don't think about, it changes the phasing of lights because we have an automated system in England, and we're based it on traffic flow.
And when we looked at a bus only, besides not only having disastrous effects relative to, congestion in the neighborhood, you don't get the throughput of the 7,000 per hour. You don't have enough buses to be able to get to that and to handle the surges before and after. And as we think about the long-term growth, we're now starting to see multiple events on any one given day. And so that system of the APM that is elevated above ground, we really work to try to keep the lanes of capacity for cars and vehicles, realizing that there's still parking, people still driving into the stadium. But just like at LAX, and that's where I came from before working here, you have a people mover that moves people with time certain travel. Every 3 minutes, you're going to have time certain travel associated with it. And so that's the kind of system that even Metro, when they did their own independent analysis, concluded was the right type of system for handling event surges. Now, I do want to go back to Metro because Rodney hasn't been able to speak. So Rodney, can you please introduce yourself and share about the projections about Measure M?
Certainly. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rodney Johnson. I'm the treasurer here at LA Metro. So one thing I can speak to is the performance of sales tax in Los Angeles County. It's been solid. It is bolstered by a broad and diverse economy within the county. Where are we about 9.8 to 10 million folks living in the county. One of the things I think it's important to not just look forward, but to look back. It's been a solid performer, and you can tell that by Metro's credit rating. We're rated AAA by Standard & Poor's and AA1 by Moody's, which means that we have a strong ability to repay our bills, right? So for what your purpose is today, you want to know if that revenue is going to be there, and the answer is yes. And I think that in looking back, we experienced COVID, right? And everybody remembers what happened. Everything came to a stop. Sales tax took a slight hit, but by 2023, not only did it come back, it came back stronger and better. So our projections have been solid. If you look at it in a micro, you're going to have some volatility. If you look at it over time, it reflects the nationwide trends of sales tax in all of the United States. And it's that they're a strong performer, and you can assume a solid collection over time.
And in terms of the repayment, let's talk about the Metro's commitment to work with the COG and how, the different ways things could be structured.
Sure, right. So those revenues are in Measure M, correct? So we know they're going to be there. They're allocated to the region. So what the CEO's office is committed to doing, and the board, is to set up fair and reasonable negotiated terms to use those funds to repay back in the event those funds had to be drawn on to begin with. I know, again, it's my understanding that a lot of these funds are backstop monies and may or not be used at all.
Jackie's got a question.
I have a question because you had on their CRD repayment. First of all, I want to explain that these are scenarios. Every time we've asked for how it might work, they explain that this is not what it would be. These are scenarios that the way it could work. But I was told, and somebody shook their head, that the CRD, which has to pay, I think, 20% for affordable housing, is going to have only $1.5 million revenue. What is the projected revenue from the CRD?
Well, can we finish one issue at a time? Because we have Cosmont here to talk about the projections for the CRD. I just want to make sure before we move on from that, the repayment structure that Metro is saying, and we hear them committed from the CEO's office, that they could be structured in a variety of ways. So they see $3.4 billion coming. And you can trust them or not, but they're trusted in terms of their track record. In terms of the repayment structures, it's flexible and it can be done in a lot of different ways. For example, one of the ways that you can handle it here at the COG, and I know this was an issue, is you can take 10% off the top, the way it was talked for every member city, if that's what you wanted to do. That was a discussion. The other way you could do is we looked at historic programming here at the COG. $50 million to $60 million could be reserved annually at the same time, even if you wanted to take 10% and a $50 million reserve for all the other transit agencies, for all the other partners to move forward. Or alternatively, it could be structured if you wanted to do a percentage of available funds. And the ATC is limited to that repayment. There's multiple scenarios, and the repayment plan, it could be like a mortgage. It could be repaid faster if projects that you had already slated were moving forward for whatever reason, and you wanted to pay it down faster, you could do that too to free up money. So that's part of the exercise, and you have Metro's commitment to sit at the table to do that.
Can you go back to the slide with the columns, please, and zoom in on those numbers so people can see them in the first 10 years, let's say?
Okay.
Please.
When I get into the slide mode, for whatever reason, it's not letting me do it. So I have
With the mouse, yeah, like that, exactly.
And you can't
So-
see that? I can see that from here.
No, I can see that now. So, what I see in 2038 is $8 million going back to repayment, $81 million left over for everybody else, $2.7 million for repayment, $82.4 million left for everybody else. But our executive director is telling us now that she's gonna freeze all the monies, right? Like not.
I'm telling you that until we negotiate with Metro, this is just some scenario. We have to negotiate this with Metro, and then we can tell you, I'll bring it back and we'll tell you what it means. But we don't know. I mean, we've seen other scenarios, so this is just one.
Right? You don't have to freeze anything. You don't have to freeze. That would be something the board would decide. I think we still vote.
Well, I got a question, if you may. We had the Rams Raiders. We had the Rams Raiders game yesterday. What was the average attendance at a Rams Raider game?
Look, for an average game. For an average game, it's about 40,000.
Okay, because what I'm trying to get to is going back to the funding, right? The feds are spending 42%, other local state is 22%. You're asking the COG to spend 36%, right? Okay, of the 40,000, how many were from the South Bay?
I really don't think it's 36%. Go ahead.
Well, again, it's 851 million out of 2.4 billion is roughly 36%, right? So I'm just trying to get my problem or my dilemma is going to be when I go back to the residents of Lomita, we have all got streets that need repair in Lomita, in our cities, right? So mine is 246th Street. We've got a CIP for it for next year. We're going to fix it, right? But recognizing we're tying up funds for the next 20, 30 years, you guys may have a better crystal ball than I, but I don't know what that 246th Street's going to look like in the next 20, 30 years. We've all got RANA pressures on us relative to infrastructure. So my concern is, and I guess what I'm looking for is, what do I tell the resident of Lomita why I can't fix the street and why ITC was a better investment for them? That's my quandary. If they ask me today, ask me tomorrow, it goes to my council. Why is that better than fixing my street that really needs repair?
the way that this could be structured, as we just shared, given that there's $3.4 billion between now and 2057, if the board elected to do things like you've always done, so you're not held back from doing what you've always done, taking 10%, taking a 50 to 60 million reserve so you can do those projects. Those are the options available to you that we can work around. We can fit in with all of our other funding sources because we have partners at the federal level and at the state level that want this to work. And we've got Ryan Yakubik here to help us if you really want to get into the weeds there on how we can fit in a repayment structure on this, because Metro fronts it and then we repay them to be able to advance other COG priorities at the same level or more than you've had in the past. You know, all the money's ready to come.
I mean, that's it. I mean, if I can say, hey, I can approve this
Yes.
and resident of Alameda, there will be no impact on your planned street projects or, you know, I mean, that's kind of it, right? Because if
Yes,
I,
sir.
you know, I mean,
Yes, sir.
that's what it's all about,
Yes, sir,
right?
you can.
Well, question.
Have there been, given as a regional amenity, I can build it out. If
I turned them off. They're.
Oh. It's all a ruse. All your questions out now. My children do the same thing. They pretend to listen. Or the West Side COG or Central or any of those guys, I mean, I think you can make a case that more people will probably stay in hotels on the west side than they will outside of El Segundo. I mean, I'm selfishly invested in this, right? But outside of us, that there are any of the other regional groups. I mean, look, I love the South Bay, but it seems odd a little bit that we would be the biggest contributor. Is SCAG, the county, anybody? I mean, if it's a regional amenity, there's
So,
regions in other directions.
Region to the south, it's region in other ways, yeah.
so as you can see again, the funding sources at the state and federal, local level. The state has put in a significant amount and they are committed to us. We just actually got notification that another allocation is moving forward with them.
Give them the total number.
Well, the total number from the state is over $500 million. We have another set of federal earmarks, including a $3 million earmark from Congresswoman Maxine Waters of $42.8 million. Measure hour, you have a 250 and that was from you.
Yeah.
We have
Not me personally, sign it.
yes, $1 billion waiting for this moment.
Right.
And at the end of the month, Metro's gonna hear a companion to be able to move forward to turn in a financial plan at the federal level. And at the last board meeting, we all agreed and we made a strong commitment that we would apply for CMAQ funds when that process becomes available. And so the CMAQ funds in the next cycle have additional dollars, and I wish Comey he'd say from SCAG with, they are gonna have $1 billion in formula funds coming in the next cycle with another projected $1 billion coming again. And so we just happen to be before that process. And we will lose our momentum with not only the bid, but at the federal level.
Can I devil's advocate that a little bit? That if we show up and ask for that funding and someone's gonna show up, there's gonna be a line of people showing up with their cap in their hand for that money. And we show up and say, we've got a fully funded project, but we'd like you to fund that so we can refund ourselves. I can't imagine we're gonna get ahead of the people who show up and say, I need to fund a project.
And Chris, I would say this to you. I would say that if anybody ever told you that a 9 square mile city would aggregate about $2 billion in transportation money, $1 billion of it from the federal government, people say you're out of your mind. If you said that Inglewood would end up with a football stadium, a basketball arena, and resurrecting the Forum, and a 6,000 seat theater in U2, and the NFL networks, people say you're crazy. So the thing about probabilities, I just don't go with that. I think we as a region are going to do very well. We are very well known across this country, and this is going to have a spillover effect for the entire county.
Well, when we had the two supervisory districts, one moment, please. When we had the two supervisory districts and the LA City Council district here, and they were, I mean, enthusiastically willing to spend our money, which I don't get me wrong, like people love spending other people's money too. I go after SB1 like it's going out of style, right? But District 13 or any of those, there were no letters of support from around the other LA City Council districts.
Yes, they were.
Or maybe there are. I mean, I was,
A complete resolution from the city of Los Angeles.
are they willing to kick in?
But are they kicking in?
They don't have any money.
Really?
They don't have any.
Well, I mean, they don't, right? But that therein lies the benefits and burdens somewhat feel imbalanced a bit, right? Because there's tangible regional benefits, and Sacramento can write checks because Sacramento writes out checks and RENA numbers like it's gone out of style. But I don't know a bit of like
As it relates to CMAC, which is the regional pot coming forward.
in the future.
In the future, and it's gonna be in this December, they're gonna put out their guidelines, they're gonna do their call in the fall, they're gonna award in the summer. We just happen to miss that window.
Increment.
That being said, when you look at how the ITC ranks against their guidelines and against their scoring criteria, you have to be a federalized project. There's not a lot of projects that even now, I don't even think one project in the South Bay, maybe one, not even in the last round of CMAC funding, nothing came to the South Bay. So there should be a call for, equity, geographic equity for the CMAC. We rank very highly. I'm happy to go through everything with you to how we score against their criteria. And again, not one other project in the South Bay applied for CMAC funding when $250 million are available.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up question, Mayor. We are being advised as board members that there are legal and funding capacity challenges for we as a board to act on this proposal. How do you respond? And second, there's a recommendation at the end of the staff report that you really approach the SCAG for a project of this scale, as opposed to something so large as a percentage of all of our programming. How would you respond to that?
Okay, first of all, I forgot what it was. We were talking about statisticians and this phrase. Well, I said there's a lot of Grant Myers. Attorneys are going to tell you whatever you want to hear. I'm gonna be honest.
And you're speaking to one, but go ahead.
And there's always different opinions. And so if I have worked with attorneys, city attorneys for, I don't know, 40 years. And if I didn't do something, every time an attorney told me it could not be done, then nothing would be accomplished. So I don't agree with that. And I can find an attorney that'll tell you something different. And the attorney that Jackie talks to is going to tell her what she wants to hear. But I don't agree with that. So that's first of all. And then when you're talking about as a percentage of 3.4 billion, it is significant compared to the typical projects that are done in the South Bay. This is not a typical project. And this is not a proprietary project. This is going to have an impact on people's willingness to use mass transit, I believe, in this county. So from that perspective, I don't think it's a big percentage.
Well, and one thing I failed to say, Mayor, in answering the question okay. One thing I failed to answer was you talked about where's the county? Well, the county is our partner in the Climate Resilience District. They're putting up dollar for dollar. We're going to get to $100 million in net present value.
Absolutely. That's taxable.
Me back up towards the
It's tax.
So Jackie asked the question earlier about tell us, how much money is slated to come on the CRD. And then again, it's part city money and it's part county money. So Joseph Diegues from Cosmont, you're here. Can you talk a little bit about the projections associated with the CRD, which again puts the county skin in the game?
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, so happy to the Climate Resilience District. It is a form of tax increment financing, so a bit similar to the old redevelopment agencies. It's very similar to the enhanced infrastructure financing districts that some of the city team here may be familiar with. technically a climate resilience district is a form of enhanced infrastructure financing district. But bottom line, what drives the revenues is assessed property value growth. The boundary is drawn as value grows over time. Within that district boundary, property tax revenues available to the city, the county, other entities increases, and this district is just a way for some of those dollars to be restricted in a special purpose fund, in this case, for infrastructure. So ultimately, the underlying credit or collateral, as you can imagine, is the property value growth. We make projections for that growth based on what is allowable with land use designations and zoning, historical growth, proposed and planned growth, where there are actual applications, and all of that is within the boundary, and then of the portions that the city and county receive from the new property tax that results from that growth. These entities, the city of Inglewood and the county of Los Angeles, would be allocating some piece of that growth into the special purpose entity, the Climate Resilience District. So it would be I believe it would be the sixth of these types of financing districts that have been done so far within this county, the 29th across the state. They are all unique, but they all share that basis in property value growth and the basis in property tax revenue. So I can go further from there, but I'll pause.
So what is the assumption relative to the LA County property assessment growth? For example, LA County property assessment went up 4.8% this year. Congratulations to Inglewood, it went up 20.2%, right? So you're seeing the value of the venues in the city, right? So what's the assumption there?
The slide that's on the screen is helpful. We make projections with actual land use drivers, so number of units in terms of residential, square footage for non-residential uses, hotel rooms, and that's how we project value over time. There's an extrapolation on the bottom row. It may be hard for folks to see for what that land use growth translates into in terms of percentages, but it's that bottom row. It starts high with a piece of the dome being captured, and then it tends to sort of level off between 4 and 5% over time. And of course, these are just estimates.
Thank you.
And the slide that we're trying to show you is not only has the city updated all of their land use plans to allow for that growth, and they're all, environmentally cleared and activated. We've scoured a number of all the applications that are in the city's pipeline. I mean, this is just an example set. And this is how Joseph and the Cosmont company have done a lot of their CRD projections, and the county themselves does their own independent review. Their CEO office does their own independent review and updates that infrastructure financing plan based off of that. And they have a track record of success in Carson. So in the Carson, I know this is one example, but in Carson, their track record is shown. Yeah, a lot.
Yeah, my only question that I have is with the CRD, and when will that actually be formalized?
Joe, do you want to take that?
The goal, this is of course subject to various approvals. The goal would be to be fully wrapped up with the district formation by the end of February of 2025.
Okay.
If it's part of a funding agreement, does it have to have a guarantor in case it doesn't perform?
Does it have to have a guarantor?
Like, let's say it's obligated as part of our funding agreement, and it's, something happened that it doesn't have the funds available on the increment. Does it have to have somebody to back? Does it require a backstop for backstops for backstops?
One thing I would just clarify is that the CRD is going to be put in place for 45 years. And so it's going to be put in place until it achieves $1 billion over time. So our goal is to be able to not dip into the backstop and use that funding to support the operations and maintenance. But it will be there. It may take a little bit more time, but it will be there until that revenue is generated.
I'm just saying some of these repayment formulations that we have, some of that presumes a repayment schedule from this district. If it does not yet have funds available to fulfill its part of the funding agreement, does it require in its establishment, its bylaws, does it require a guarantor for those? If part of its founding charter is it's obligated to $6 million a year, or whatever it is, to refund. Is it required to have someone who backs?
Actually, it's not required to guarantee a guaranteed minimum. No, it's not.
Okay.
There's no backstop to the backstop.
So we are establishing through the infrastructure financing plan, priorities of use for the revenue that's generated. Committed, and there was a draft term sheet provided. We haven't gotten feedback from the COG yet, but to make it very clear that it would be a priority, that the first priority for revenue generated would go to any.
That would likely be a percentage and not a dollar value. That 80% of its generated fund.
Yes,
That's not
absolutely right.
$600
Of the increase, and the district is in that area where FI and the Intuit are, and Intuit was not calculated in an increase in property values this year for the city of Inglewood. So there's going to be a healthy increase coming in this next fiscal year for the county.
On day one.
So can you explain if the operations and maintenance are $30 million a year and the city of Inglewood has pledged $9 million a year, and the operators in this latest letter, even though they supported the stadium in 2022, they now are saying they don't support the stadium, and they said they will not pay for operations and maintenance, so they're not going to pay for it.
Not the stadium, the ITC.
The ITC, excuse me, ITC. The venue owners have said they won't pay for it. So how are you going to make up the remaining 11, what is that, 11 minus 30 million to operate the,
Right now, I do want to make sure before we answer your question, that we do answer one question that I think got lost about the legality of the vote and the binding. I didn't want to forget that before we get too far. Do you want to answer that?
But before we lose that, here's the thing, first and foremost, the venues have never agreed to handle the O&M. We do have an agreement with the Intuit Dome for a transfer of, what was the funding source?
It was for the transportation demand management program.
Transportation demand management program. That's a commitment that's either or. But so to say that in this latest letter, they said they weren't going to commit, they never have committed. And I'm gonna say this again. I love Stan Kroenke. I love Steve Ballmer. They came here and they did great things. He just said, I love Jim Dolan, don't love him as much anymore. But I would tell you this, everybody that invests in our city, we're going to have differences from time to time. But that doesn't change our working relationship.
Okay, so going to just to answer your question. Right now, we're in the process, and I have Sanjeev Shah and Ryan Yakubik here on the phone. As we're going through the negotiations with our bidder, we not only are working on the negotiations on the design and construction budget, we're also looking at the operations and maintenance. So we had conservative projections. We think we're going to do a lot better. I don't know if our bidders are listening, but in terms of that total, we have fare box, we have advertising and concessions, we have the city's contributions, which come from a number of places, including, their own signage, their hotel tax, occupancy tax, increase increment, their own. They took it upon themselves to do a transportation impact fee so that all developers, as they get their building permit, they have to pay a fee because they didn't have that before. And we also have formula funds, and Metro has been great enough to say that if they receive formula funds based on the ridership from our project, that they will pass that through to us. And we have some carbon reduction funds along with the contributions that the mayor's saying that are in the development agreement from the. Those are the sources.
And just to be clear on formula funds received from Metro, I just want to make sure everyone knows that this is not a redivision of existing funds. Metro will receive additional revenue by having more revenue service miles. And so the objective there is to commit new revenue, not just redisperse existing revenue.
Metro will receive more funds, but they are not operating this system. It is not part of the Metro system.
Correct. So they'll pass that through to the JPA. And as to the legality issue.
Okay, and so from a non-lawyer to a lawyer, I just wanted to clarify that we are not in disagreement of the legal analysis. We are not asking the COG to program funds outside of the decennial transfer process. So there really is no, I think, conflict in terms of the legal interpretation of the act.
Debbie?
Thanks. Back on climate resilience districts, I have to admit, I'm not familiar with them. I am familiar with California special districts. Does this require a publicly elected board of trustees to oversight funds and policy? And if so, where will these people be elected from? What areas?
Joseph, do you want to explain the structure of a CRD and what's required by state law?
Does it require a vote?
Yeah, no vote. So no vote, first off. The actions would be the city council acting, the county board of supervisors acting, and then a new entity is created, to Debbie's point, called a public financing authority. In this case, it would technically be called a climate resilience district board. That board is comprised of 5 members. It would be 2 elected members from the city council or the mayor, county supervisor, 1 member.
Yes.
1 member of the public appointed by the city, 1 member of the public appointed by the county. So it's 5 people. That 5-member board is responsible for essentially running the CRD once it's formed. Very importantly, that the CRD, before it can be formed, has to prepare this draft governing document that memorializes all these deal terms we've been talking about, the percentage allocations, dollar caps, splits between projects, all those sorts of things. That infrastructure financing plan, which is in draft form today, gets approved independently by the city council, county board of supervisors, and then the final stamp of approval, sort of, so to speak, is by this CRD board. The CRD board holds a series of public meetings and hearings. At the last public hearing, there's not a vote, but there's an opportunity for protest. That protest means if more than half of the combined number of residents and registered voters within the CRD boundary, more than half of those folks protest, we cannot move forward. Essentially, short of that, the district can be formed.
Thank you.
Other questions? Go ahead.
So one of the things, as I'm listening to the conversation, is that while, you've come with the proposal and an ask for numbers that we're obviously struggling with, because they're big numbers for us. They're big encumbrances for us, for our constituents in all of our cities. And I think a great point was made is you happen to sit in the South Bay, but the benefit, because I thought you made 2 good points when you spoke, is it a good project and does it benefit the stakeholders at large? And stakeholders at large is a very, for LA County, that's a big radius around that project. I wonder if we might, maybe this is a conversation that we have on Thursday when we come back to actually take an action. And while you've come with an ask and we're saying, geez, we're struggling with the ask, are we comfortable with a smaller number? Do we say, well, here's what we can do. We can't do that big number, but we can do this number. And there's lots of other stakeholders, I think, that you could go and maybe get all the rest of the support. And I will say for me, I feel like the backstop, I think that's a good chunk to go get somebody else to do the backstop. And then for us to think about a different number that we think we could support while still making sure we have unencumbered funds for the projects that we need to do in our communities. Just a thought.
And the reality is that kills everything. We don't have time to get another commitment. We don't have time. So that's the same as saying not do it.
And one thing
that's probably a you issue and not a me issue, I think.
No, actually, it's a group issue. It's not a me issue. This is not about.
Well, that goes back to coming here 2 months before.
This is not about me. This is about us. So that's what it is. It's kills it.
And one of the things I can say is that's where we are. The commitment to continue to apply for the CMAQ is not, it could be in your motion, but the commitment is here to do that. And we rank very high on those scores. That's number 1. Number 2, we can structure, I want to go back to the conversation. If folks don't want to kill the project and they want to do this, but do this in a protective way, because I understand that. There's many different ways to do it so that we can allow your cities to have what they need. If the historical, you can look back, we can look forward. Historical programming, even though I know they haven't actually
drawn down this much. It's been, $50 million of programming annually to make sure everybody has projects that they can move forward. We can look at a structure like that where you say $50 to $60 million plus you could add on a 10% off the top so that all your cities just have a confidence, that they have those funds that they can count on for their planning. We could do it a lot of different ways, but the time is now, fortunately, as it relates to this project. We did try, for the record, to come and do a workshop. We were told to have the email, and I don't want to do that, but that nobody was interested. We don't need to do that. We've offered to do it even earlier. One of the things that was, and the way in which it's restructured was always the same. What we had been working so hard to do over the summer is work with our bidder team to really understand the total cost and have them update their cost so we can come to you with confidence that we knew what we needed to get this done and line up that bid validity and that bid now with the FTA plan and the FTA momentum. And I mean, it is a make it or break it moment for the project. Now that happens too.
So Jack, let me ask you a quick question. So based on what you hear, right, that potentially will have $50 to $60 million for project. Based on the past history of project that we had for all these cities, how do you think that is a number that we could survive, per se, to fix our roads?
Our projects are getting more expensive. Our cities, we had several cities that didn't even participate in the beginning. We're trying to find a way to get all cities to participate. I cannot project that Hermosa Beach has come in with projects. The supervisors are actually telling people that they should come here instead of funding. And so we're getting more and more requests for projects. I cannot presume to say what the future is going to look like. And I want to say, since I have the floor, that my job is not to support one city, it's to support all cities. And so when I come to you and say that we can't, they're telling us that we can negotiate all these things later, but I can't with assurance say to you that the negotiations are going to be the CRD will have its money, that there's no representation on the CRD, as you heard. We won't have any representation. The Metro, who knows what the cash flow will be like with Metro? I can't say with any certainty how this will work out today if you want to vote on this.
But we do know with certainty how much we've spent.
Yes, we do know with certainty how much we've spent.
Money have we spent, and it's less than $50 million.
And David, you were going to say, I think that the impact is definitely going to. Do you have the impact? You're meeting with cities.
Is there a number?
Hard to project it.
We're still meeting with.
That's the hard part.
I'm not asking you to project. I'm saying how much has been spent.
What's been spent, though, I don't.
The last 10 years.
But the future, it doesn't help you with the future.
I want to ask. I'm asking a question.
Your loan and we didn't approve new projects this cycle. We approved about 20 or 25 million in additional Measure M funds for projects that are already on the books that either needed cost increases or moving into the next phase.
Are you an attorney? The question is, how much did we spend?
We have programmed about 300 and something $million so far in Measure M from 2019.
How much did we spend on an annual basis?
When we don't know how much we've spent, the city spend the money. We program the money, and once it's programmed, the city can draw on that money. So that's what he's saying. On Measure M, it's 300 some, and then we don't have Measure R anymore because we've used all of Measure R, which was 906 million. And so we are now talking about only Measure M. We cannot tell you what we've spent because it's programmed and it's sent out to cities. It's no longer available for everybody else.
With Metro now? Because I know somebody knows. I know how much money we spend. So I know
I know every city spends their own money.
It's our understanding that $50 million are programmed annually. That's why we came up with this offer. So we want to grow it, and you want to grow it, we can come up with a plan if that's the way you want to do it.
realizing that I don't believe on any one given year, you actually draw down that much. But again, that's the kind of,
So you're,
looking forward, knowing that 3.4 billion is available. We understand all the different needs. We have flexibility to figure out ways to do it.
And it would be presumptuous of us to tell you what the repayment plan would look like. If it's important to the COG members to have what we talked about last month at the infrastructure working group, or this month, was that there's an interest in seeing a 10% off the top of the pot local return to the cities. That still seems to be a policy that's in development. We looked at historic spend. There's a lot of different ways. We just didn't think it was our role to dictate what that repayment plan is. If there's a desire to structure it right now, the terms could be set to make sure that there was a commitment that a base amount was available for other priorities.
And then I think Lalena's here from Metro. I think she didn't.
but I think it's important to remember that the programmed amount of money is different than the cash flow. It is. And what they're saying is you program it and you want to spend that money and you change the rapidity of your project, you can do it faster. That might affect the cash flow. We don't know any of these things.
We have Lilini from Metro here, the CFO of Metro.
Hi, good afternoon. So I just wanted to ask that 300 million in Measure M, how long, how many years is that for?
It's from 2019, whenever our first approval was, through today.
So that's like 5 years.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, so Jackie and others, I am working on trying to get the information on how much is actually being spent by the cities, because I think the COG programs the funds and then the cities bill us for the amount that they need per year. I think I can say I don't have the numbers, but I think it'll be less than 50 million a year.
It probably is less, but just because they aren't spending it and claiming it for reimbursement doesn't mean that I can give it away to somebody
Right,
else.
yes.
I have to reserve that same amount of money because someday they are going to ask for it. Inglewood asked for 250 million in Measure R 6 years ago and hasn't billed it. So I still have to reserve it. And so from a programmatic standpoint, it has to be spent in my mind.
But there's another factor. When you reserve something, we also get new money next year. So it's not like you're reserving it and there's no new money coming next year.
But let's be real, just because we have flexibility in the terms doesn't create more money. There is only so much money that is available from now until whatever date we pick. So
Yeah,
just because there's flexibility and cash flow differences doesn't change the total amount of money that we have available to spend on programs.
I think my perspective is, given the flexibility that we can build into the repayment plan, I think you can do both. The historical numbers do speak a little bit about what the future will look like and what is going to change significantly that maybe you'll double. I mean,
I don't think,
more
Nalini,
can you do?
Nalini, I think you're way out of line. This is our money and we should decide how we are programming it, not Metro telling us that we can.
I'm not saying that, Jackie. All I'm saying is, if you've been historically spending, let's say 50 million, okay, maybe it'll become 100 million. I mean, there needs to be some basis for what you're going to say, what you need. That's all I'm saying. I'm not telling you how you program the money.
Thank you, Nalini. Luke.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to note, I mean, and I don't want to get into any Brown Act issues because the item for an actual action is before the board on Thursday, and this is just a discussion on the various components. And I appreciate the discussion that has been going on here, and wish I could be there with all of you. I think I just want to note that one of the key recommendations that came out of the Transportation Committee in accepting essentially what the COG staff had requested was that the terms for payback, or excuse me, that the director the executive director is directed to develop a schedule for the funds that balances future programming capacity for other priorities and projects. And I look at this as, the board's job being to establish the policy and staff's job being to implement it. And the board providing direction to the executive director to implement the policy in a manner that is not affecting other projects and priorities for our cities meets the moment in a lot of what we're discussing here today around how is this going to affect things, how is this going to impact things. That's the point of the staff, the direction from the board for staff to work with Metro, to work with the ITC Joint Powers Authority to determine how to do that, not the responsibility of each individual city to have to figure that out. Like that, our job as the board would be to simply establish the policy. So I think I just want to, I'm a little concerned that it feels a little bit like we don't have confidence in our team here at the COG to actually carry out board direction that meets the need. And this is a direct recommendation that came out of staff that was incorporated into the Transportation Committee recommendation. So I just want to note that.
Just to clarify, the staff said if you were going to do that, it wasn't our recommendation. It said we're going to pay, if you're going to pass this, then you need to do the following thing.
And that was something that, as I recall, was accepted without any reservation. So I'm just sensitive to, like, we're having a lot of back and forth about the impact here to other priorities and projects that are in many cases unforeseen, things that will come up 5-10 years from now, whenever that may be. And the direction here is that's a decision to be arrived at and an approach to be arrived at with the direction of the board that we will make sure these things are held harmless. So thank you.
Thanks, Luke. Other questions? Go ahead. Say.
I guess I'd like to hear from Luke. Maybe why does the Supervisor Hahn support this so strongly? But before that, I don't think that our past use of Measure M funds can direct our future consumption, because just in our own city, we've experienced all these construction projects go up anywhere from 50 to 100% in terms of cost. And that's basic repaving. I think I got a quote for repaving a connector street from $4 million about 3 years ago, and now it's over $6 million to repave it. So I do think that we're going to need more money. With that said, according to this repayment schedule that we saw, if you go back up to that repayment structure, at least one contemplated one, it seems like it's leaving a lot of money, the majority of the money, or super majority, 80-90% of it still for the COG to dispense. And it seems like it's rear loaded in that the larger payments are occurring later on. So what I wonder is, how many of you have actually taken this to your councils to discuss it and come up with a council vote on it? Do we have an additional week or so that we could get it to a council vote, for example? Because I'm one council member. I generally probably would lean towards this, but we have another council member here who is against it, and I'd like to get input from my fellow council members before I bind the city of Redondo to a position.
Actually, well, Kurt, I'm going to ask the attorney, sir. Is the COG a representative body for the COG? Is it necessary? Because since we're not using individual cities' funds, this is the Joint Powers Authority. Is it necessary that individual councils agree to this?
So I'm assuming by the bylaws, you are referring to the COG as an independent entity under the joint agreement, and you certainly know that.
Okay.
But to the extent that certain members would prefer on large decisions to go to their council, that's certainly within their prerogative as the delegates. Haven't I purposely given you both answers that you were
on both sides?
That was great.
I love you for that.
And it's non-binding, civil and non-binding. And this, again, we're working against time relative to bid validity and the FTA process. But I know Luke has his hand up because he asked him a specific question.
Sure.
Yeah, I heard the request from the council member for why the supervisor is supporting this effort, and I wanted to address that. And I apologize to those who were at the committee last week. Some of this will be repetitive for you, but I think there's a few points I would just call out. One is that due to, I think, frankly, the diligence of this team, we're talking about a project that's already 75% funded through state and federal sources, which is quite significant. I mean, this is something that we see at Metro all the time, where Metro is trying to get funding from the state and feds for projects. And this project, I think by virtue of the merits of what has been presented, has been able to position itself more strongly in some cases than some of the Metro priority projects, which maybe there's a little bit of envy there. I don't know, but I would say that, the supervisor sees this as demonstrative of what our state and federal funding partners see making sense as an approach that we want to improve our regional transit services. So that's one area, is that it's already got a significant amount of state and federal sources. And really, this is to close the last remaining gap on that. I noted in my remarks last week that Measure M and Measure R and Prop C are legacies of Proposition A, which is a Kenny Hahn effort that he put together, where he understood that in order for the voters to actually approve new sales tax on themselves or transportation, you had to include local return, dollars for our local cities. The previous iterations of Prop A that all failed at the ballot did not. And the very notion that we even have local dollars available to support major projects like this is a legacy of the supervisor's father and his 40 plus years on the Board of Supervisors, and why she feels like it makes sense that we would build off of that and create something as significant as ITC with these local dollars. The last thing I would just note is that, this is not uncommon. I think someone just noted a project that came back to the COG because it was a project that had gotten some funds already from the COG and had cost overruns and needed additional funds from the COG to be fully funded. That is a regular occurrence. Now, this is in its own category because it is such a large amount of money. At the same time, it is quite common this is not for those of you who've been on this board for a long time, that these are things we approve month in and month out, where it's, a $2 or $3 or $10 million project that we suddenly need $2 or $3 or $5 or whatever million more dollars because of whatever unexpected, unforeseen additional things came forward. That's why we have the local dollars available to us to support these projects. So those are the reasons that the supervisor is a strong proponent for this project. She sees it as the real opportunity in the next few years to act. I mean, bid has been approved. It is, ready to go, shovels in the ground. Frankly, we're not going to see another project that's able to move as soon in LA County outside of the San Fernando Valley in the next couple of years, with shovels in the ground actually getting stood up and constructed. So that's a really significant thing, and why she would like to see this move forward. Thanks for the opportunity, Councilmember.
So, quick question. What was the total county funding for this project?
The county doesn't provide funding for any transit projects.
Except we have the CRD loop with the.
Well, yes, the CRD I would know. Yeah, the CRD is absolutely its own unique thing that the county is working in partnership with the city. That then means there are county dollars that it would otherwise get from property taxes that it is not receiving. So the county is generally reluctant to support efforts like that. I have not been in the day-to-day around those discussions because it's not directly in our district. But my understanding is that the county has been very supportive of that effort. And that's not typical necessarily for the county to be supportive of CRD or EIFD, because it's reluctant to give up future property tax revenues. But that is something that they've been working with the city around.
And what's the estimated value the CRD will put out over a period of time?
Value of the CRD is.
So
have it updated
it's,
here.
The net present value is 250 million. But it will stay in place until $1 billion is collected through this year.
Okay, yeah, so NPV today and billion or whatever, right? And that period is what, 50 years, you said?
45,
45.
based on our prediction.
Okay.
With the first year having the intimate zone values.
I have a question. If you don't take Metro to the people mover, where is the parking for getting on the people mover?
Well, we have a number of spaces. First of all, there's Metro. The line. Thank you. Councilmember. We have a first station. You can see here where the maintenance facility is located that would be able to house parking. And we also have pickup and drop off locations. We want to encourage people to use the Metro, but we also have a study that the mayor and his team is doing right now on understanding how to create a parking district on Market Street to have, some bookend parking, have pickup and drop off for Uber and Lyft, and the very first station itself is a reservation of parking.
How much parking is that?
Over a couple hundred.
So a couple of hundred if you don't take Metro.
Actually, if you count City Hall parking structure at Locust and Regent. And then the parking structure underneath this, the senior center. So it'll probably have about 300 spaces altogether.
Right, all within a walking
300
area.
spaces altogether.
So 300 spaces for people that don't take the transit.
Right.
And I guess I just want to, everybody keeps talking about this, but I just wanted to go back to these letters that were so offensive to the mayor. It says right in there that the venues will do shuttles. The shuttles will bring people in and out. They're going to expand their shuttles that come from all over the north and the south. Whereas there really, if you don't take the rail, you're not going to be able to use this people mover very easily. And it seems to me that the shuttles, what Councilman Obaji said is what every other venue does. I've done a little research on this. A dedicated bus lane is exactly what the mayor's talking about for the Olympics. Make it hard to drive your car. That's exactly why people would get into transit. So this to say that you'll mess up the traffic for everybody else is exactly what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be saying, take transit, don't get in this, get on your local bus and come to the stadium. So it seems to be a little contradictory to what the Olympic theme is. And I wanted to bring that up. I think the parking is an issue. I've also, I don't think we ever plan for parking when you're not talking about people taking Uber and Lyft. And I do want to go back. I know it's nitpicking, but I want to go back and say that the letters you distributed today are no later than 2022. The price of this project changed. And now we have letters from the venues that say they no longer support it. Of course, they supported it in the beginning, but now they're saying they don't support it. And I think that's important. And maybe they can speak up at our board meetings.
Well, we have a few things to say about the shuttle. I think Councilmember Obagi talked about the quality and level of how long it takes and a frustrating experience to take shuttle. And even the operators themselves, that the mayor actually was the one that crafted the I Park and Go program. That was not done by the venue, that was done by the city. It happens to be, it shows you when you provide a convenient option that it is a success when people collaborate together. And that is, has been working. But that's not the preferred mode. We want to be able to match world-class facility with world-class infrastructure. And everybody agrees with us. The federal government agrees with us, which is why they're holding out $1 billion waiting for us to be able to provide time-certain travel from the Metro system. And we're very proud that the analysis shows, which has been vetted by Metro and the state and the federal government, that it's going to increase ridership on the K line, on the Metro system alone, as well as we've had a lot of conversations with Caltrans, and Caltrans has opted to partner with us on a number of grants, including Solutions for Congested Corridor,
because they see a direct benefit of people switching modes to relieve congestion on the highways. And so, we don't have Caltrans here today, but you can talk about why they've come in to partner with us. So we have, again, an elevated level of passenger service than just busing. And as it relates to the venues, I mean, they can speak for themselves.
No. Hold on a second. First of all, love the venues. They have their own economic perspective. They have their own concerns, and we respect that. However, every agency that's involved in transportation planning at the state, the county, and the federal level have seen fit to fund this idea to the tune of $2 billion. And to say that we get a couple letters, love them to death, Gerard, that we get a couple letters after we received a bunch of complimentary letters, actually supporting the project, and to say that now this is the make it or break it because we get 2 letters now, respect them to death. But this isn't about the number of letters I get. I got about, we shouldn't have pursued football. We shouldn't have pursued the Intuit Dome. We shouldn't have built the NFL Network's headquarters. If I did things by a popularity contest, we would have none of this. We, the South Bay, would have none of this. So, Jackie, with all due respect, everybody can make an argument about why something won't work. The difficulty is figuring out what will work. And that's what I believe we've done.
And I think shuttles will work.
Okay, good.
Okay, we'll take one more question because the hour is getting late. Anybody else?
Comment. I'll just make comments to be clear about what I stated. The shuttle system currently is broken.
Right.
People were boarding the Torrance Transit Center one because the Gardena line was way too long. And it also took forever, over an hour and 15 minutes to get back from SoFi. What I will say is this, any motion that anybody makes on Thursday to go forward with this should direct staff to also not sequester our funding and to keep it available for the cities who apply for it. Because what's being told to us is, and what we're looking at in these scenarios is that there's ample money to start repayment of this and keep money available for our cities to do projects. So.
Thank you. Lee?
Am I too late for a question? Oh, sorry.
I've been listening to the whole discussion and I just have a couple of questions. One is for Mayor Butts, because I understand from what was said that your city is asking, or you in particular, asking for an exception to the rule that we normally have some kind of match from the local city that is getting the benefit of our funds. And so I want to know, what's your argument against Inglewood having that match, especially given all the revenue that your city is getting from these high volume venues? And then the second question is, given what was said that it's going to increase ridership on Metro, why isn't Metro or some other entity affiliated with Metro, including the Board of Supervisors, willing to put in money to get that? Because it is a regional benefit to have that, close that loop so that they can go from these venues directly into the subway rather than taking a shuttle. So I want to know the answers to those 2 questions.
Okay, to answer the first question, if you just look at the pure numbers, you talk about match. It isn't like we came and said, oh, we want 300 million, we want 400 million, and then we're not giving a match. We already come to the table with $2 billion. That's the reality. We come to the table with $2 billion. And then what was your second question?
Well, what is the 2 billion used for? I don't know where that went. Is that a match that we typically require? Because I heard from the COG that you're asking for an exception to what we usually do for these projects in causing a local match for the funds that COG provides.
So if I could clarify, it's my understanding that the match policy is actually under reconsideration. So I think we are focusing it on an existing policy that the COG was actually going through a whole process of re-looking at. David, is that accurate?
So, yes.
Okay. So, sorry.
Question. There's a formula that we use. Think of it sort of like income tax. There's a certain match required on different increments of a project cost. So the amount of outside funding that the city has identified for the ITC versus how much our share would be limited to would require them to, they're asking for more than the formula would allow us to get. So that's the exception. We are also relooking at the match policies currently. But I think it would probably be staff's recommendation that any new policies be applied to new projects, not retroactively.
So just to clarify, it's a complicated income tax based policy where the last certain amount is 25%, requires a 25% match. At the end of the day, what we are asking for is a 29% match with 71% of the funds coming from other sources. So, that 4% difference that would be in compliance with the match is really sort of the difference of making the project financially viable. That's why we're respectfully requesting a waiver.
And Mayor, but you mentioned the 2 billion. I'm looking at just the table. Where's that 2 billion?
So it's right here. You've got the state has cycle 4 and cycle 6 awarded. We have the raise and the earmarks awarded. Measure R, has been awarded. And then the federal money, which is the urgency for the timeliness of this vote, are $1 billion standing committed to us in the, and once we turn in our financial plan and we show we have this match, their version of the match committed, we'll go into the finalization with them on the process to get a full funding grant agreement. So those are all the different sources of funds that we've accumulated. And as Luke talked about, it's very difficult for projects in the region and the state to be able to accumulate all of these funds in this time period that we've been doing it.
Okay, so that was the original base project budget as opposed to what the new budget is, right? Relative to the two of them.
Yes.
It's because I was I'm trying to figure out, okay, hey, the COG went from X to Y, and how did that's what I was trying to understand. How did I get from X to Y? And it goes back to the 2.2 versus 2.5, et cetera, right? Okay.
There was no answer to the Metro, why Metro is not putting in if it's going to it will exponentially increase their ridership. I mean, there's no doubt about it because a lot of people will go to those venues and will jump rather than get on a shuttle. They'll get on to get straight into the subway. So I don't understand.
Councilmember, if I may, I wanted to speak to that actually.
Okay.
Because I thought that was a very valid question and I wanted to speak to it directly. So the Metro board voted a few years back for the agency to become a formal member of the ITC Joint Powers Authority. And I think one thing I would just note out of that effort, out of that work, Metro's participation, that is reflective in part in some of these numbers that you're seeing here that Lisa is sharing. There were several other Metro projects that were vying for that TIRSIP Cycle 6. And by virtue of Metro's participation, not exclusively because of it, but by virtue of Metro's participation in this process, this project was much more successful in getting that Cycle 6 $400 million from the state. And I note this in part because there were two other projects that the board wanted to advance that had been Metro projects in the Measure M spending plan that did not get a dime from that cycle because Metro is a participant in advancing this project, even though it's not in Measure M, was more successful in being in the queue next in line for those state funds. So that Metro doesn't have a pot of local dollars to bequeath unto capital projects, right? It has Measure M and what's in Measure M, and that's that is delineated line by line in the voter approved ballot measure. As you know and others know, this project was not in Measure M. This project came about as a result of discussions that were subsequent to the South Bay subregion's discussion around what to include in Measure M that then became part of that ballot measure. And so it is in an awkward space where there are projects that were in Measure M, including the Green Line extension to Torrance. And then this is not one of them because it was not even on the radar yet for the subregion when that discussion was occurring for the ballot measure in 2015. So Metro was a participant. It is a participant in the JPA that successfully secured not just the $400 million in the TIRSIP Cycle 6, but that federal capital investment grant. And that CIG, I just want to note, council member, those dollars, because this project is awarded those dollars in that fashion, that then puts it ahead of other metro priorities, similar to Cycle 6 in the state grant program. So while it's not like an easy, like, well, Metro's got these dollars it's bringing in here or there, and I think to your question, what I would note is that Metro's participation in JPA, Metro's coordination with the ITC JPA, which is a separate motion the board approved, has led to this project being a much more successful contender and actually, in many ways, jumping the queue ahead of other regions, not South Bay, but other regions, Gateway, San Gabriel Valley projects, that this project has been awarded state and federal funds when those have not. So I think, you know, it may not be as evident within the South Bay subregion how this project has had that impact regionally, but I can promise you from where I sit as working for the chair of the Metro Board, Supervisor Hahn, that we are seeing a direct impact for other projects, and we continue to work together as a regional transportation agency, understanding that this is an important project to deliver. That's why the supervisor is backing this, and I'm sorry if that's not like the cleanest answer to your question, but I think it's the best answer I can give because there is a real impact in the way that Metro has engaged this project.
Okay. Well, that answers partially the Metro issue, but then speaking to Supervisor Hahn and Supervisor Mitchell, I understand it's in her district and she's also supporting this. I know the supervisors do have discretionary funds that would help mitigate the ask that is being asked for the COG to take the burden for what's going to benefit the entire LA County region. Are there any funding that they can deliver or would look at delivering in terms of their discretionary funding?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair question. I don't know what the level of discretionary funding that's available in SD2. I can only speak to my experience within our office. And there's two things I would note on that. One, those are typically reserved. The county supervisorial office's discretionary funds are typically reserved for the unincorporated communities because typically those are the areas where the supervisors have the most direct impact. And two, it's not a lot of money. Like discretionary funds in the supervisorial office district wide maybe amounts to a couple bucks per resident, right? It is in the couple millions of dollars total. It's not a lot of money that's available to disperse. And frankly, for the kind of ask we're talking about here, you could, you know, it would be symbolic at best. And really, I mean, and I'm not going to speak to the Supervisor Mitchell's, you know, willingness or not. I don't know. I don't know if she's been asked about giving discretionary funds, but you know, for our office, being able to make available anything more than like $1 million to a high-profile project is a very big lift. So it's just a geometric imbalance in terms of what we're describing here in the ask and the need for this project to get to fully funded versus what's available in the supervisorial discretionary fund.
Yeah, all I can say is that every little bit helps, right? And
Yeah.
I do know that discretionary funds have not been limited to the unincorporated areas. But the other thing is in terms of possibly Inglewood, maybe the mayor can answer this, taking a bond and then getting the repayment for the bond that would be from these monies. Has there been any discussion about that to help finance this?
Right.
The exploration of a bond, we looked at why that's not part of the equation.
Can't hear you here.
It has been looked into and discussed with the city and their financial advisors. There's concern relative to the level of the bond.
Let me be more direct. In the past, before I became the mayor, the city bonded itself into oblivion. Our space for bonding is non-existent at this point.
Okay, well, you were not in the financial situation you are now. So I get that, but things have changed. So I'm just putting that out there.
Right.
Okay.
The bonds are still out there.
So I've got
Those are all my questions.
Okay,
So we'll take one last one. Go ahead.
So from what I understand, you need the local funding to secure the federal funding, right? And that's kind of that's the quagmire where we're at, right? So we saw Maxine's letter. What is your, again, who knows, right? My crystal balls, right? So what do we think, the likelihood of getting the federal funding is based on at least Maxine's opposition? I mean,
That's a good question. First of all, Maxine's premise was that it should be spent on affordable housing. It's a transportation infrastructure bill. It can't be spent on anything but transportation. The only thing that can happen is that money can go to another state. That's all it can happen. And so, it's what was the second part of it? And as far as that was her opposition, that it should go to affordable housing. The money can't be spent on affordable housing.
And just so you know, what happened at that.
Well, wait a minute, and there's one more piece. She voted with the Republicans for two of us not to get the first 200 million. When it went to the Senate, they restored it in the budget.
So the project has received entry into the engineering phase of the federal grant giving process. And so they have basically said, we have committed this money to the project. You need to show us that you have the non-federal funding matched. The Biden administration has programmed the funds. The Senate approved that allocation. It's now allocated fiscal years. And so we have gotten no indication from our federal partners that money is in jeopardy. This is just that their commitment to be able to move forward with the actual grant agreement is happening on federal.
So Maxine's opposition is irrelevant.
And we have to go through a robust federal to get to the finish line with the FTA. I mean, they're looking at the local match in order to get it. They're going to do a financial plan analysis, and we're going to work on closing with them, but they have a structured process, and we're literally have that momentum with them to close that hopefully in a short amount of time.
yeah, because I know when you originally came, we had talked about federal milestones, right?
Yeah.
And so I guess my question is, what's that next federal milestone where we, it's either a yay or nay kind of thing? When is that?
So we have to turn in our financial plan to them in November. And they're going to evaluate it, and then I hope by the end of the year, by January, February, we'll be able to have to a place where we can get to a full funding grant. And honestly, it's a race against time.
I mean, I got it, right? I'm trying to scope this, bound this, and manage expectations, right?
Yeah.
Why is it a race against time?
We're just looking at the partners that we have been working with FTA. And you have a presidential election. We're just looking at, the big picture.
So you're saying that, so there is,
We have a bid that's going to expire. It all has to align. We fill in all of our grant sources with our procurement.
do they expire?
It expires.
The bids expire, yes.
When does the bid expire?
I think right now it says the end of the year. It's about the same time as going forward.
I just throw that out because you've been asked to find other funding and you say there's no time, but there is time to find other funding.
We have a commitment to keep applying for those.
I'm talking about the other funding we're talking about here, other places in Los Angeles, other councils of governments. There is time.
So when I say that bid expires, that means that we have to commercially close on the contract. It does not mean that we have a commitment and then go back to FTA and then finalize a contract. And so all of these milestones have to happen financially. To be able to do that and actually commercially close on a contract before the end of the year requires that all of these steps happen.
Jack, back to your point, you can always try and go get more funding, right? I mean, nothing's constraining us from, hey, I can go get this pot or that pot, right? I mean, nothing's constraining us, right?
Keep trying, yes.
But, I think that, we've got this, the elephant in the room, if you will, and this is it, right? And that's kind of where we're at. And, that's kind of where we're at, right?
Practical man.
Do we have time for one quick question? I'm sorry, just a clarifying question.
No, go ahead, Brandon.
Hi, thanks. Ray Jackson, Hermosa Beach. Mayor Butts, you said that the ITC obviates the Centinela grade project, and that was the original ask. Is that the case? Because when these dollars were reprogrammed initially a couple years ago, that was my very first COG meeting, the Centinela grade project was still on the table. So what has changed that now has obviated that project?
I misspoke, as Donald Trump would say. For the time being, this is a much more important and critical transportation need. That does not mean that we won't want to change the elevation of the grade crossing.
If this project doesn't go forward.
But if this doesn't go forward, we need to.
So that Centinela grade project remains on the table for future consideration.
Yes, sir.
It's been on pause.
Right, but the mayor said it would obviate, he said the ITC would obviate that project. That's why I was looking for clarification.
I told you, I definitely misspoke, sir.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thanks, Redmond. Okay, the last question.
Just last, and so I know you might not have this now, but for me, it does boil down to how this affects the South Bay and the transportation system and the economics, but more the transportation, because that's what these monies are for. And in your reports you've given me, it talks more about the streets in Inglewood and that, but it doesn't really give me a warm and fuzzy that it's going to be helping transportation in the South Bay. So if you could provide that information to us before Thursday's meeting, that would be great.
Sure, we can look into our ridership modeling.
And the reason I ask that is, and I know that you're eager to get us to pass this, but these facilities, which are awesome, have created a friggin' mess.
Yep.
And you guys know that. And so the last thing we need to do is just keep spending on more messes. Like we need to fix transportation.
Smiling, Jackie, but go ahead.
No, it's true because we wonder, it takes so much effort for us to get things done in our cities, but these mega projects just get pushed through and all the rest of us are forced to deal with it. And so I want to see how it affects us in the South Bay so that I can go back to my constituents. And say,
Well, I would definitely tell you that the traffic that comes into, we probably have 4.5 to 5 million people a year. It doesn't emanate at the border of Inglewood. It emanates from north, south, east, and west. Anything that releases the cars that come into the venues relieves traffic from north, south, east, and west.
And we can.
and good, so you should have the data to show us.
Our ridership modeling, understand folks' points of origin, understand its impact on the roadway network and highway network, not just the local street network.
Okay, that would be good.
Yeah, I mean, that was
all.
kind of my point from what's it mean to Lamita, right? And I think that's kind of John's point. I need to be able to articulate that as opposed to, hey, there's this conceptual thing, but what does it mean for me? What does it mean for that resident, right?
Okay, we thank everybody for their time today on a Monday, and we appreciate all the input and all your conversations. So we can adjourn.